Welcome to The Teacher's Story. I'm Jackie Scully. This is a podcast to elevate teacher voice. In this program, you will hear teachers sharing their journey into this profession and their ideas for education. I'm kicking it off Teacher Appreciation Week, which starts May 2nd. This is about honest, vulnerable, inspiring storytelling. It's a time and a space for teachers to share their ideas for the future of education. Teachers are beautiful beings who give their heart and soul to their community. They're innovators, they're inspirational, not only to children, but to the people around them. And they deserve to share their voice. So welcome to The Teacher's Story. Enjoy. Hi, welcome to The Teacher's Story. I'm Jackie Scully, and today we have Eleni Theodorou with us. She is a bully interventionist educator and anti-bullying educator. She's an author with her children's books for her program. She's the president of Telling Tales publication, and she's originally from South Africa. And a lot of her storytelling in her books comes from her, background and culture in South Africa. So I'm so excited to share her story today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Jackie. I'm so excited to be part of our interview today on this beautiful Sunday.
Yes.
And forward to these discussions we have today.
Me too. And it's funny that we're both in New Jersey, and so we're not too far apart from one another now. And so maybe in the future we'll get to meet in person.
Would love that. Would love that. I'll come down from the north.
My first question for you is, what originally inspired you to become a children's book author and then get into this work of anti-bullying prevention?
Well, interesting story. My background is in psychology, and many years ago, more than 15 years ago, I was working with one of the top play therapists in South Africa, and she encouraged me to take an additional course in play therapy. So I did that. We got given a final assignment. It was a case study, and we were asked to write a story so the child in the case study would be able to relate to it and thereby hopefully open communication between us so that we would be able to work with them. So I scribbled my little story about a porcupine in pencil, and I handed it in, and I was just done. And years later, I think it was probably about 7 years ago, in conversation, my mum was like, you were always really good at creative writing, and I remember you wrote a story about a porcupine. Why don't you put pen to paper, get a book published? I was like, well, what do I know about publishing a book, And I was working long hours and commuting long hours, and I just, so Mummy Dearest gave me some tough love and told me to figure it out. So I was burning the midnight oil and learning and reading online of how to become a self-published author, because as you know, it's tough to get into any publishing house. And I was just raring to go, so I put it all together. I have my background in brain profiling as well and the related coaching with that. So I started to put some activities together, and I also knew I didn't want my children's book to be just another children's book. I wanted it to facilitate healthy conversations, whether it be in the classroom or bedtime, between children and their caregivers or their adults. So at the back of each of my book are a list of questions that relate to the story that they can discuss, and started out at first just reading in people's backyards, at barbecues, at libraries, and simple things to get started. And eventually I was like, wait a minute, I still have that experience with the brain profiling and all of the other courses that I'd taken. So I started to put those activities together and inadvertently became a bullying prevention educator. So it is a multi-sensory experience, a culturally rich experience for children. My main character is an African crested porcupine, because there's quite a difference between an African crested porcupine and a North American porcupine, which is a little more fuzzy. And his name is Noko. The series is called Noko the Night. And I eventually had this program put together in its initial stages, did pro bono work at schools locally, and then it took off from there. So I now have programs for kindergarten right through to grades 5 and 6. Oh, wow. Fortunately, I'm able to speak a little bit of Spanish. My books are available in Spanish and Afrikaans as well. Afrikaans is one of our home languages back home. And all my material is also available. Educational material is available in those languages. So get to go to the schools now. I'm able to connect with our Spanish speaking students. My dad is Greek. My name is Greek, as we just discussed. And so it was easier for me to pick up on the Spanish and pronounce those words as best I can. And the connection with the kids is just incredible. So we're able to work with our ESL classes and even with our special ed classes as well, with the story time, with the actual presentation and the programs really. So yeah, so that was the start, all because of mummy pushing me to get it done. And here we are, and I've developed further programs since then, and schools are bringing me in as a speaker, and it really is a privilege for me to share not only my story but also about our cultures back home. The students get to learn about each of my characters. They retain their traditional African tribal names, so we get to pronounce that together in class in a very encouraging setting. And I tell the kids, well, look at that. You just learned a whole bunch of new languages today. I let them understand that in South Africa, we have 11 official languages.
Wow.
Yeah. So we get to pronounce that. We get to learn about Noko, his behavior towards his friends, the consequences he needs to face. So the first book that I have behind me, the orange one, Noko the Night, An Unexpected Gift, is the book that my bullying prevention programs are based on, and we unpack from there.
Yeah. Wow. I love this idea that it was birthed from first a class that you took. I know so many people. I have a friend who's a podcaster, and his podcast is like taking off, and it started with a class in his second master's program.
Wow.
So sometimes, and this is like a cool thing to talk about with teachers. Sometimes you might create a project for your class that a student does that's just for maybe like, again, that class, and then it hits them later in the future of like, wait, I have some skill and talent here. This might be something I want to foster. And it can sometimes happen much later in life. So just like, you did this class, and then like your mom mentioned, hey, you have something here. You should, go with it. And now it's like taken off to be this whole program in schools. I think that's fabulous. I love it.
Thank you. It was not part of my grand plan, but apparently, it was meant to be, and here we are. And it's such a privilege, such a privilege.
Yeah. And I just posted about this, just saying, it wasn't part of my grand plan. And my dad always said, life happens when you're not making plans. Sometimes things just fall in your lap, and then it happens.
True. And I'm so grateful. Yeah.
I love it. Before we go into maybe a little bit more about you working with kids and teachers and bringing this into schools, can you tell us a little bit more about the story and the characters and how you tie in that cultural piece? And you do some things with like the environment as well, right?
Absolutely, yes. So, like I mentioned, I didn't want the story just to be a flat story. I wanted to add some dimension to it and some activities, because quite frankly, I am a little long-winded when it comes to writing my story. So it is a little long for the kids, and I break up the story with different activities, mindfulness activities. But to give you a little rundown of the first book, Noko the Night, An Unexpected Gift, Noko hears he's about to become a big brother. And he has all these big feelings inside, and he's not sure what to make of it. And he's walking around alone in the darkness of the bushveld, the forest. And one of his dear friends in Yorka, the African rock python, comes slithering by and overhears what Noko is saying. And he asks him, Noko, what's the matter? And Noko is startled, and he's so shocked by this unexpected guest, that he starts to shake, and his quills start to rattle, and then his quills shoot out and accidentally hit the snake. Also, an educational point, I make a confession when we do at the end of the reading. I'm like, guys and girls, I have a confession to make. Porcupines do not shoot out their quills. And then, the students are fast, and I'm like, well, in real life, porcupines, like most animals, give us a variety of warning signs before they try to defend themselves or their families. So that's how I tied into the nature, aspect of it. And they get to feel real porcupine quills, which I have right behind me.
That's so neat.
Here we go. I promise I did not pluck any porcupines.
Wow.
A gift from the Staten Island Zoo. They have a resident porcupine named Bintu, which I got to meet a few years ago, and I got to present for their patrons, or to their patrons, and they collected these beautiful quills, from his den. which I now use as part of my presentation as well, and compare our behavior to that of porcupines in nature, and compare these sharp quills to when we choose to be unkind or don't include others at playtime, at recess, or at lunchtime, things like that. So they get to feel the real quills, and then Noko has to face the consequences of his behavior. So he goes back to school. It's a big baobab tree in my story that I call Nature's Night School, because all of my creatures are nocturnal. We explore that topic as well. And upon arriving at school, his friends want to know, hey, what happened? And it's all in a very compassionate setting. So I encourage children to come from a place of curiosity instead of judgment and being critical. And then they explore the house and go, hey, what happened between you and the snake? And they give him the opportunity to share his side of the story, and they forgive him. And we touch on that topic as well, the importance of forgiveness and what that really means for friendships, not just among students, but with adults too. And so that's really the crux of the story with Noko and his friends, and eventually his little baby. I won't give it away. I'm not going to let you know. Baby girl or the baby boy. We have that competition at the end of the story as well in the class. And then he realizes his duty as a big brother, and he fulfills that role. So it's a very relatable story, for most of the children, and they love to share about their families and their younger brothers and sisters. And so it makes for an interesting presentation for sure.
I'm sure. And I love this like whole, you're bringing in so many different areas of, skill and growth and learning, of like learning about another language, learning about another country, learning about animals and animals from another country and compared to animals we have here. And then also obviously the SEL, the social emotional learning, and consequences and how to be compassionate, family. But then you have this multisensory experience with the quill, and then they can also share about their connection. So it's really this holistic way of teaching. We think of like a book or an SEL program is very one-dimensional, but this seems like it's very faceted. Can you tell maybe a story or something about going into a school or going into a class and doing this presentation with a group of students, or like working with the teachers and how they could incorporate this as well?
Oh, absolutely. So the pandemic was really an opportunity for me to find other skills and, work a little bit on those. And I created some videos, animated videos with Noko that tie into my SEL curriculum, which we now make available for PD training. And so we have videos that teachers can just log on to on my YouTube channel, Noko the Night. We have a lovely one that's about 3 minutes long, teaching children tactical breathing exercises, which I had learned that is being practiced within the military. So we teach kids about that. And I actually have a school counselor as one of my newer characters, because we value our school counselors very much. And Counselor ZB taught Noko how to do these breathing exercises. So we did it all together. And I have little GIFs of Noko doing his little breathing exercises like this and winking at the kids, So teachers are able to use those videos. And then I have all sorts of activities that when I'm done with the presentation, I leave them with a packet. So they will have some activities to do with the younger children, which are more around, creating their own bookmarks that are all within the Noko the Night theme and within the theme of bullying prevention. Yes, I am a knight. I choose to do what's right. I choose to be kind. Actually, my main slogan is "It's cool to be kind" with the big heart. They get to color that in as well. And then the bookmarks, they get to personalize their own bookmarks and stick them together and have that on hand. And the students get certificates too. So they're not only intrinsically motivated, but extrinsically as well through my presentations. And we have posters for the classrooms and one big poster for the school entrance, so all can see it, including our adults. Noko Busts Bullying. Or we bust bullying like Noko. But yes, I do have activities, free resources on my website in English, Spanish, and Afrikaans that teachers are welcome to download and enjoy with their students. With the older students, the 3 through 5, grades 3 through 5, I actually have an assignment packet that I leave with the teachers. And I encourage them to do at least one assignment a week for, I think there are like 5 activities in there, really encouraging students to explore their emotions, how they prefer to cope, or give them some skills to help them cope in stressful situations. And we also leave the session on a high, on a positive note, where I have students understand how hard teachers are really working to make sure that they're happy and healthy, safe and successful at school. And I remind students that we need to show our teachers respect and our appreciation. Most teachers come in well before, early in the morning, before students are there. They leave well into the late afternoon, and then they still have to attend to their families, back home. So I give students that perspective as well. And I remind them to make their pinky porcupine promise, to choose to be kind and respectful, to choose to speak up when they see someone is not okay, needs help, or even if they need help. And then also part of that promise is to show our appreciation to our teachers. And we go into that, like, how can we show our appreciation to teachers? And then we go, and the teachers appreciate that so much.
Oh, sure.
I really do. I see you, and I really do appreciate our teachers, and what goes into the sacrifices that are made. So I really feel that our teachers need that support as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that this is such a great support for the teachers, and you have everything there. You can go in and do the presentation so they get a feel for it, but then here are the materials and the PD that they can have as well. And do you feel like this time, like living through the pandemic and coming out, because I talk about this on the show a lot, like as my piece before we get into education reform, as a time where it's kind of an opening to have more of these conversations about our, emotional state, our mental health state, like how to take care of each other. Do you find that you're having more success with your book and this program, and these conversations are coming up more as you're talking to more schools and teachers or parent communities?
Absolutely. It is vital that we help our children, first of all, understand what it is that they're feeling, and then help them regulate their nervous systems. Stress is coming at us from all angles, and then, to add on technology and, social media and that for the older students, they really do need our help in terms of navigating those emotions, navigating these difficult times. And I do believe that the social emotional learning element is just as important as the rest of the subjects that we have in school. Because at the end of the day, once we leave school, we may or may not choose to go to college or a trade school, but we're inevitably going to have to interact with the world.
Right.
And we're going to have to be able to regulate our emotions. We're going to be able to control what we say and what we do, whether it be in our personal relationships, romantic relationships, or professional relationships, or even just being, on the road, driving on a stressful, stressful day, and you're on the road. So much can be avoided if we're able to regulate what we're feeling and manage our stress levels. So I do believe that schools so far the schools I've interacted with, and I believe there are many more, that want to support this even more, to incorporate this into the curriculum, not only for their students, but for their staff as well. I mean, the workload is incredible, what most teachers are facing and having to work through. So I'll always be an advocate of wholesome ACL, teaching these wholesome values to kids, helping them make smarter choices, the right choices, and then taking good care of ourselves first, so that we're able to manage ourselves and then be part of the solution for the greater group and for the school culture as well on a bigger scale.
Yeah, and I heard from a lot of different people kind of after coming back from virtual. There are a lot of behavioral issues in schools, especially at the elementary and middle school. I teach high school, and I'm in a small private school, and we actually weren't virtual too long besides the lockdown and then here and there in 2020, 2021. But it's across the board. It's been very challenging for students to come back to school, and then, their social development is lagged, their cognitive development is lagged. And then they're trying to get back into a rhythm when maybe a lot of what they were doing for a year and a half was on their own, and not doing a lot of social interaction where they need to problem solve, with these different areas. So then when you're thrown back into school and you've been alone for a long time and they're just still learning, they're very reactive, right? And they probably don't know how to regulate those emotions. So I could see something like this and just real, like you said, wholesome SEL across the board being like one of the top priorities in school at all levels right now, because we can't go back and say none of this happened in the last 2.5 years and we're just going to go back to 2019 and do it the same way. Like we can't, like and maybe that's better this way. Like maybe before, how we were doing school was too focused on content and focused on subject matter, and we really truly were not thinking about the whole child. Because I know coming out of college, when I was starting to be a teacher, it was like 2005, the whole push was technology. Everything was like, how do we make education better? Technology, STEM, that was like the big thing. And it was really about, because we need to be competing with other countries. And for so long, education has been about competition with student against student within a school. You have different tracks and groups of students, who's on honor roll, who's winning these awards, and then competition with other countries, looking at test scores. And we just never were paying attention to, how do we actually foster a human being? Like, how do we foster a child, then into teen and young adult, to be a good human being and have healthy relationships, and healthy relationship with themselves first, and then healthy relationships with others. So that whole interpersonal skills, I think, should be prioritized 100%, even before subject matter. And I'm a history psychology teacher, so I'm right there with you with psychology. So I think it needs to be, what we should be focusing on. Like, if I were to go back to my school and meet with faculty and say, like, what PD do we want right now? Like, the professional development I want is how to really support our children in having important conversations and relationships, all of this SEL work, because it's a struggle right now. Like, it really is. And ultimately, it doesn't matter what work they're doing. Like you said, if they go to college, trade school, you're a human in the world. You're interacting with lots of people. Our world's becoming more diversified. Our country in America is very diverse. Like, you need to be able to interact with people from different backgrounds. And, we're a polarized country, we're a polarized society. And so this work is part of combating that too, combating all of these divisions that we have with everyone falling into their groups. It's because they don't know how to interact with different people. And so I think on a bigger scale, this is a really important part of school. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to just add about kind of this piece in where education's going in the future, and like what we really should be prioritizing and looking at in our education system.
I definitely, and obviously, I have my agenda of wanting to help children be uplifted and empowered within themselves, and then be able to contribute in big ways, in good ways, in society. But, you had mentioned going to college, and I remember the pressure on us to, competing to, get into college, and then in college or university, how tough that is. And, I'd been reading some studies, and it's so sad to see how many college students are truly struggling and eventually resort to, unhealthy ways of coping, with their stress, with the pressure, whether coming from home or from the outside. So it is vital that we help our children during their formative years to learn that and normalize the focus on social emotional learning, and the value thereof. So I will always encourage not only schools, but families too. So when I do my presentations, the students obviously get their little goodies to take home, and we make a pinky promise that they will go and teach their families what they learned with me and Noko during the presentation. The breathing exercises, what they learned about Noko's behavior, and how Noko made it right with his friends, and how we can do better in the future, to try and spark those conversations at home as well. We don't always know what's going on at home. And as you say, we live in a diverse society. So people come with different, mindsets and different ideas of, how to handle conflict and how to handle, mental health issues. There are many communities or cultures that don't believe in even talking about mental health at all. So it is important that we're able to support our kids that way, and sort of encourage that message, in positive ways at home. The interesting thing is I now have schools that are asking me if I'll do workshops with parents, and I'm very happy. I'm actually working on something for the new school year for parents. So it really is important that we come together as a community for the sake of our children, because eventually they are going to be, our leaders. And and I mean, if we don't have really good communication skills, what does that mean on a global scale? If we're unable to manage our stress or manage what we say, it could, have detrimental impacts later on in life. So I will always support schools. And I actually do. When a school or an organization invites me to come and present, I believe in win-win opportunities, and I shine a positive light. I offer them positive publicity across my social media platforms and on my website. So it is important that we also reward those who are seeing the value of social emotional learning, and actually implementing it in their schools, in their organizations, and really support one another that way.
Yeah. And I love this piece about the parents, because I talked about this on the show, that I think there needs to be more of a collaborative effort with parents, teachers, admin coming together and knowing that all of these, I hate to say the word stakeholders, but, in the world of stakeholders, but they're all stakeholders in education, and coming together to support the child is really, important, because you can't do it in a silo. You can't just have a teacher doing the work and no one else is, or you can't have like the parents combating the teachers or the teachers combating the parents, because I think there's transparencies missing. Like there's sometimes parents don't know what's going on in the school, or knowing the purpose of curriculum. And I think you need to have those conversations. So bringing parents into the work that you're doing and how it's implemented in the classroom, and they're part of the process, then it just opens the door to say, like, we want you here too. We want your input too. We want your questions or concerns or whatever that may be. Because generationally, this is different. We're in like that kind of Gen X millennial generation where we're kind of still, we get it, and having those conversations with our kids. But generations before that, they didn't talk about this stuff. Or like when I was in school, we didn't talk about it. So you do have to kind of understand that if you're doing this in school, but there's no connection at home, they might be like, what are you doing? Like, what is this? Because they didn't have that in school. They don't know what this looks like. So I think parents just want information. They don't want to be in the dark. And I think the pandemic opened up a door, because they got to see what was going on in the classroom on Zoom, to be like, oh, this is different. Oh, I didn't know you learned in this way. And, maybe there was some pushback here and there about curriculum with certain subjects, but ultimately it's probably because they just have questions. They just don't know what's being taught, and they just need to know, why are we doing this? Like, what is important about it? So I love this piece. I think that will strengthen the program, and it will strengthen the community in the school.
Absolutely. I want parents to see their school as an ally.
Yes.
I always encourage parents, get to know your child's teacher, get to know the school counselor, get to know the principal, make those meetings, go to the parent teacher meetings, be involved in the PTA if you can. I understand that many parents are busy, many of them have multiple jobs, so I'm respectful and understanding of that. But any opportunity just to, like you say, learn, get to know the school culture, get to, learn more about the team that your child is working with, and because that will just make it so much easier if there is something that needs further attention. Nip in the bud, okay, these are the plans of action that we can try, and see which one is the best fit, and then go with that. But yes, my aim really is, and I still do, when a parent calls me, I encourage them, get to understand, get to meet the teacher, build that relationship, and the students as well. When I talk to students, I say, listen, your teacher wants to know that you are okay, that you're doing well at school. Teachers go into teaching for the most part, I believe, because it's a passion of theirs, and they want to see their children thrive. And so that trust is also very important to build up in the class. I explain to students that this is your family away from your family at home. You're together what, 6 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
We need to look out for each other. And I actually just made a video because once I'm done presenting, about a month later, I emailed a video to the school coordinator that would share it with the teachers, where I'm popping in to check that they're living up to or keeping their porcupine promise. And for the older students, I just make mention that, you know, younger students are looking up to you.
Mm-hmm.
They're seeing how you're behaving. And yes, it is a heavy crown to bear. But keep in mind that these little eyes are watching you guys on the playground. They're, you know, at recess or in the hallways. So let's just do better every day. Let's make smarter choices. And I'm transparent with the kids. I say, look, even as adults, we make mistakes. It's imperative that we acknowledge them. We recognize that, acknowledge it, and then ask for forgiveness and do better the next day, not make mistakes again.
I love that. And I love the conversation. Like, really, whenever you're teaching something to a child, it's, I think, talking about the purpose, like the purpose of this lesson, the purpose of these connections. And I like the idea of the older students being like the stewards in their community, and you're having little eyes on you, looking up to you. That's very, very true. I like, you know, we talk about this in my psychology class when we talk about observational learning. I'm like, all those, you know, siblings you have or smaller kids, they're listening and watching everything you do, and they will remember and they may mirror it as well. So good or bad behavior. So you are very influential. Have you received any, I don't know, like off the top of your head, I don't want to put you on the spot, but any like feedback or testimonials from either kids that have said anything about the story or program, or teachers or schools that you could just share some of like that?
Absolutely. I've had some fun moments, let me tell you. One of the most memorable ones, I'd actually served my own city. I was brought in to work with all of the elementary schools, which I was so honored to do. And about a year and a half later, I was at a local community Zumba class, and I was drenched, and I looked like a lobster, boiled lobster. I was red and sweaty, and I had these three little kids running after me left and right. I'm like, well, what is going on here? And they're looking at me, and they're chatting amongst themselves, little ones. And so when we finally got a break from the Zumba class, they came up to me and they go, excuse me, but are you Noko's mom? I was like, yeah, how do you know me? And I mean, I looked so different from, you know, presenting at school. And they're like, you were at our school. And I was like, oh my gosh, which school? So they told me, and they're like, well, I asked them, so what did Noko teach you? Do you remember? And they started to rattle off the lessons that Noko had taught them about kindness, about, you know, forgiveness and being there for one another, you know. So that was so touching to me that these kids recognized me out of the school environment, and they were able to you know, remember those lessons. And I had a similar experience where I was invited back to a school for a luncheon, a different school, 3 years later. And I was placed at the table with some of the fifth graders, and they're looking at me and I'm looking at them, and they're like, we know who you are. Like, you? And they're like, the porcupine. And I was like, oh, really? And then we started, you know, chatting about that. And I showed them my second book, Noko the Night, What's Your Tribe's Treasure? So that story focuses on cultural appreciation and cultural diversity. So Noko and his friends, they, you know, it's recess time, and each of the characters are, you know, they've got their little lunches, their lunch bags, and Noko notices the different lunches, and the curious lunch that Mabudu, the art wolf, is eating. He's slurping up some mapani worms, and he's like, what is that? You know, and they explore the different foods. And as a teacher, I'm sure you might have witnessed such conversations in the lunchroom. And he's like, well, wait a minute, I want to learn what's so special about your family, and I want to teach you what's special about my family. So he invited them home, he invites them home, and then he shows them his prized collection. I'm not going to give it away, but it's a very interesting collection that he has. He actually shares them, he gives them favors to take home as well, and then they have a conversation about it the next day at school. So it's a very special story, that one in particular. And I incorporate our Heritage Day, which we celebrate September 24th in South Africa. So they get to learn about, you know, the way our traditions back home and our celebrations. But yeah, so those are the two stories that come to mind in particular with students that had found me outside of school. With teachers, I was just brought back to a school district. I think this was probably my 5th contract with them. So I'm very grateful for that.
Wow.
For the superintendent bringing me back in, had me working with all of these elementary schools. And when I got to meet the district curriculum director, I hadn't met her before. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to meet you. You won't believe this, but all the teachers are so thrilled that you're coming back. Because I saw them, I presented last, I think it was 2019. So just before the shutdowns. And they were so excited to see me and have me back, and they love the presentations, and I actually include the teachers in the presentation, so you know, it's a very interactive experience for them too. And then when I got to the classes, some of the students I had presented to years before, they would have their Noko the Night book, and they would on their desk, and they would wait for me to notice, and they would slide it forward to see if I would notice books, you know, and then I would tell them, listen, you're not allowed to give away the answers, okay? So because, you know, I have certain questions that I ask them throughout the presentation. I'm not allowed to give away the, you know, the gender of the baby, and so we make it fun that way. And you know, it's just all around such a special experience, and we've gotten wonderful reviews from top superintendents all the way to our teachers, and I'm so grateful for the wonderful feedback I've been getting. And I'm always open to feedback. You know, I'm learning and growing too as a presenter. So I love to hear, you know, if there's anything I need to improve on, and tweak them as needed.
Yeah, this is wonderful. I'm so glad that you've received that type of feedback. And it's great to see how kids will just come up to you and share their takeaway and how they remember you, and that stays with them. And as you were speaking through this whole interview, but just in this particular part with the feedback, it just feels like joy. And that is one of my big kind of, you know, mission and visions for how, you know, we can make school better, is that we need to infuse joy. And I think social emotional learning is part of that. But like these playful characters and these like stories about culture. And I love this like second book of like culture identity, and like going home and talking about food, and let me share this. And whenever students share about their own background, especially anything to do with food, they light up. Like you know, they light up and they're so excited. We had a cultural day. It was part of our, so for Black History Month, we had our BSU do a Black History Month Spirit Week, which was really fun. And like each day was a different theme. And on the last day was like cultural identity of any background. And so you can represent that through clothes or just through an artifact or whatever. And in my history class, I said, oh, it's cultural day. Let's each go around and share something about our background. And it ended up taking almost the whole class. But I'm like, you know what? It was worth it. It was a worthwhile conversation. And they were all like super lit up. And these are 11th graders. These are juniors in high school. And they were asking each other questions. And, you know, they felt a little like timid. Like, I don't know if this is a good question to ask, but I'm really just coming out of curiosity. Like it was a very like open, safe environment. Where, you know, that doesn't happen like all the time. And so those moments of joy and like seeing students light up is just so special. And I think like this is just a powerful program that you have. I'd love to see it in as many schools as possible. Do you want to just talk about in kind of this last part before we share like your contact information to share with the listeners, any about expansion of your program? I think you mentioned something about this developing back in your home country too, in South Africa, right?
So Noko was born in South Africa, as I mentioned before, out of a play therapy assignment. And I joke and I say, well, he was raised here in America as a teenager, and I was going back to South Africa to make a big impact on children back home. So we've just launched Noko the Night and the Noko Busts Bullying programs back home, as well as my K-2 social emotional learning curriculum for teachers. We have a pilot school lined up in my hometown where I was born, in KwaZulu-Natal. So I'm very excited for that. And they would like for us to do it in English and Afrikaans to start. So so that's very exciting for me to know that we're able to reach our children back home as well. Here in the US, you know, I'm booking up as a speaker at schools. I offer assemblies per grade, as well as individual classes. The individual classes have been quite popular because it is a smaller, intimate space for children to explore the topics and to feel comfortable to speak up. And it really offers an opportunity to maximize on the experience with students and the return on investment for the school. But I understand that school schedules don't always allow for that. So we have the assemblies, we'll get them done in a day. and they still have a big impact on students, and they still get their takeaway goodies that I leave them with. So yes, we're preparing for the new school year. Any schools that are interested in using up budgets that they need to use up for this school year, we still have a few spots available. I'm actually busy. I just got the illustrations back for my third book.
Oh, wow.
That one is a cookbook for kids, because I come from a bicultural home. My mum's Afrikaans, my dad is Greek. We were raised mainly Greek, and but we were, very fortunate to be able to embrace both cultures. And I'm actually introducing my Greek culture in my third book. It's called Noko the Knight's Kitchen Delights, and he
I
has
love it.
cousin that's flying in from Greece with some of my favorite ingredients from Greece, and it's going to be a wholesome cookbook for kids. I actually have merchandise that ties into that as well. We have our little chef apron sets, Chef Noko's apron sets, and we have the t-shirts. It's Cool to Be Kind t-shirts, cookie decorating kits for kids. So we're promoting It's Cool to Be Kind parties as birthday parties. And
Oh, I love that. That's a great idea.
so we have little
Yes.
decorating kits, and they'll get everything they need. They'll get a few cookies in there, gluten-free cookies. They are delicious, I promise. And they'll get everything they need to decorate their little Noko the Night cookies, him and his friends, and the slogan, It's Cool to Be Kind. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to the new school year, where we'll be able to work with the parents, do those workshops. I'm working on offering one-on-one coaching for parents and the families when it comes to bullying prevention. And then of course the school presentations, coming in as a speaker, and having these fun experiences and presentations with the kids.
This is impressive. And all of this from a assignment in a class and a little prodding from your mom.
Absolutely.
I love it. I mean, this cookbook coming out, this sounds like so much fun. Like, I'm like, I want to go back into being in like first grade again. I could see kids like dressing up and being like, let's make something. And again, food just connects people, and to bring all the different cultures into it. And I think when you start young, then as they get into like middle school and older, they have that experience with interacting with other cultures and people, and being open-minded to it, so that again, we're not having these polarized groups and having all of this like, debates back and forth, but like a curiosity and joy of wanting to get to know people from different backgrounds. I think that is a great takeaway.
It's
Yes.
beautiful. And we're going to focus on wholesome ingredients from the moment you walk into a store, making healthy choices there, and making healthy snacks together, little simple things that kids can help mommy and daddy with in the kitchen, and make for themselves, with some videos and some research backing it all as well. And also, most of the ingredients I'll be incorporating will be ingredients that Noko and his friends enjoy too, minus the worms, of course.
That is so fun. I love it. Can you tell us where our listeners can find you, your best like contact information? I'll include that in the show notes as well.
Thank you. So it's Noko the Night, Noko the Night with a K, .com, nokothe-night.com, or you can reach out to me by email, press@nokoandfriends.com.
Thank you so much. This has been so wonderful, and I'm really impressed with the work you're doing. I could see this expanding to many more schools, and I hope it does, because this is really important work. And I think the kids, it sounds like the kids and the teachers, they're loving it. So congratulations. This is amazing.
This was a lovely conversation, and I want to wish everybody a beautifully blessed year ahead, and look forward to serving your schools.
Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Bye.